He's getting older, more forgetful. We're concerned about his ability to maintain such a large property. My son Sterling told the real estate agent, not knowing I was listening. At Thanksgiving dinner, I proved just how sharp my memory really was, and destroyed their lives with one envelope. Before I tell you what was in that envelope, drop a comment with your location if you think family betrayal is the worst kind of betrayal. I never thought my own children would conspire to steal my home and ship me off to die in a nursing home, but here we are. My name is Harrison Clarke, and I spent 40 years building bridges. I understand foundation stress points, how small cracks become catastrophic failures. What I missed were the fractures forming in my own family. This Victorian mansion has sheltered Clarkes since 1897. When Martha died 8 years ago, I became its sole guardian, determined to keep her memory alive through tradition. Every Thanksgiving I'd open these doors like she did, welcoming our 3 children home to Bull Street. Garrett Sterling and Vivian would fill these rooms with laughter, just like the old days. For years it worked. The house breathed again. Martha's china sparkled, her recipes warmed the kitchen, and for precious moments, grief lifted like morning fog over the Savannah River. But foundations shift. What starts as settling becomes something more dangerous. I began noticing things an engineer notices. Load distributions changing, stress patterns shifting. Phone calls that stopped when I entered rooms. Conversations about property values disguised as casual interest. Eyes that measured crown molding instead of admiring it. My children stopped seeing home. They started seeing assets. The house that had sheltered 4 generations was being appraised by the very people it had protected. The bridge I'd built between past and future was carrying traffic I never intended. This year felt different, though I couldn't calculate exactly why. Maybe it was Sterling's hushed phone calls, or how Amanda suddenly photographed rooms she'd ignored for decades. Maybe it was the way they looked at me. Not with the eyes of children seeing their father, but with the cold assessment of contractors evaluating a structure's remaining useful life. I'm 65, and I've learned that the most dangerous failures happen slowly and visibly, until one day the whole thing comes down. I should have run the calculations on my own family, should have tested the load-bearing capacity of blood and loyalty, but everything was about to change in ways I never imagined. Sometimes the bridge you think is solid has been quietly crumbling beneath your feet, and you don't realize it until you're already falling. For 8 years I welcomed them with open arms, never suspecting they saw my generosity as weakness. The deterioration was systematic, professional. 2015, Garrett brought flowers for Martha's grave. 2016, he brought a measuring tape. I watched my dining room become Sterling's war room. Papers scattered like battle plans, phone calls at midnight. My Persian rugs worn thin by his pacing. Just need backing, he'd mutter, staring at the crown molding like it held his salvation. Amanda started photographing everything. For memories, she claimed. But her eyes calculated square footage, not sentiment. Vivian perfected the art of strategic helplessness. Sweet smiles during dinner, mysterious headaches during cleanup. I'm just not good at that sort of thing, she'd whisper, vanishing upstairs while I scrubbed her children's fingerprints off Martha's piano. 4 days became 5. 5 became a week. My grocery bills tripled. They slept until noon, demanded fresh coffee, expected 3 meals prepared on schedule. I became the hired help in my own home. The questions started innocent enough. Dad, isn't this house too big? Have you thought about downsizing? What happens when you can't manage the maintenance? But their eyes told different stories. Sterling tested the banister's stability. Garrett measured window frames. They stopped asking about my health and started assessing my longevity. 2021 brought contractors, friends who happened to specialize in estate sales. 2022 brought real estate magazines left casually on my coffee table. They'd arrive expecting service leave, expecting inheritance. I cooked for 12, cleaned for 12, hosted for 12. They treated me like the caretaker of their future property. The breaking point came last Christmas, when I found Amanda in Martha's bedroom going through jewelry boxes. Just admiring Mom's taste, she said, but the appraisal app on her phone suggested otherwise. By 2022, I wasn't hosting family anymore. I was running a free resort for ungrateful strangers who happened to share my DNA. Something was shifting in the family dynamic, but I couldn't see it yet. Like metal fatigue, the damage was happening in places I couldn't measure until the day the whole structure would fail catastrophically. I just didn't know they'd already started the demolition. The first crack in their facade came on a sweltering August afternoon when I returned from the hardware store earlier than expected. That shifting dynamic I'd sensed was about to reveal itself in the most devastating way possible. I'd gone to Lowe's for weather stripping, the kind of maintenance task that keeps a 126-year-old house from falling apart. The Georgia heat was brutal even for late summer, and I'd cut my errands short when the humidity became unbearable. The front door opened silently. Something I'd always been proud of, those well-oiled hinges that Martha used to say made me sound like a ghost coming home. Today that silence would serve me in ways I never imagined. Sterling's voice drifted from my study, confident and businesslike. Yes, it's an 1897 Victorian in the historic district. Prime location, original hardwood throughout. Current market value easily $2.8 million. I froze in the hallway, shopping bag still in hand. He's getting older, more forgetful. We're concerned about his ability to maintain such a large property. Sterling's tone was clinical, detached, like he was discussing a deteriorating building, not his father. The voice on the other end was tinny through the speakerphone, professional. Market timing is crucial. Fall's typically best for this demographic. Buyers are thinking about settling before the holidays. My legs felt unsteady. I pressed against the wall, hidden by the curve of the staircase. We've researched assisted living facilities, Sterling continued. Sunset Manor has excellent reviews. Full care, beautiful grounds. He'd be much happier there. Catherine's voice joined the conversation. When can you come do a full assessment? We'd prefer to handle this before he gets too attached to staying. Too attached? To my own home. The family agrees it's what's best for everyone involved, Sterling said with the authority of someone who'd never asked what I wanted. I backed away slowly, my engineer's precision failing me for the first time in decades. My hands shook as I set the bag down in the kitchen, the weather stripping scattered across Martha's counter, like evidence of my own obsolescence. Sterling was pricing my life like a commodity. Not just the house, me, my independence, my memories, my remaining years. He'd calculated my worth down to the dollar and found me expendable. This wasn't spontaneous concern for an aging father. This was premeditation, planning. They'd been discussing my future without me making decisions about where I'd live, how I'd die, what would happen to everything Martha and I had built together. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the casual efficiency of it. Sterling discussed shipping me off to Sunset Manor like he was arranging storage for unwanted furniture. In that moment, I understood that my children weren't visiting their father anymore. They were appraising their inheritance, and I was just an obstacle to liquidation. I needed to know how deep this betrayal went, and whether it was just about greed or something far worse. Helen approached me nervously that September morning, clutching something that would change everything. 2 weeks had passed since I'd overheard Sterling's real estate conversation, and I'd been studying my children like structural blueprints, looking for signs of deeper damage. I should have known Helen would be the one to show me just how far the foundation had already cracked. She'd been part of our family longer than some marriages last, arriving each morning with the quiet efficiency Martha had always appreciated. This morning, her usual calm was replaced by something I'd never seen before. Fear. "Mr. Clarke," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's something you need to see." She handed me a manila folder, her hands trembling slightly. "I found these in Sterling's briefcase when I was cleaning the guest room yesterday. I didn't understand what they meant, but the documents inside made my blood run cold. Mortgage papers, official bank letterhead. My name typed neatly at the top, but the signature at the bottom belonged to someone else entirely. That's not my handwriting, I said, though we both knew it already. I grabbed the phone and dialed First National, my hands steadier than they had any right to be. Years of crisis management on construction sites had taught me to function even when everything was falling apart. "There's been some kind of mistake with my mortgage," I told the loan officer. "No mistake, Mr. Clarke. Your home equity loan was approved 3 months ago. $120,000. Your son Sterling presented all the proper power of attorney documents." The room tilted. "I never signed any power of attorney." The silence on the other end stretched like a cable under too much tension. "Sir, I think you need to come in immediately." Helen's voice cut through my shock. "Mr. Clarke, there's more." She pulled out her phone, showing me a notepad where she'd been tracking something. "Sterling's been getting calls from cryptocurrency exchanges. Angry calls. I heard him crying on the phone with Catherine last week." He lost it all, didn't he? She nodded. Every penny. And now? She gestured at the mortgage papers. I called the bank back. What happens if this loan isn't repaid? If payment isn't received within 60 days, we'll begin foreclosure proceedings. I'm sorry, Mr. Clarke, but the paperwork appears to be in order from our end. 60 days. Sterling had put my home, Martha's home, 4 generations of family history, at risk for cryptocurrency speculation. He'd forged my signature, fabricated legal documents, and gambled away money that was never his to begin with. Helen sat quietly while I processed the magnitude of what my son had done. Not just planning to steal my house? He'd already stolen it. The deed might still have my name, but the bank owned it now, thanks to Sterling's fraud. What kind of man steals from his own father? I asked the empty room. The desperate kind, Helen answered softly. But Mr. Clarke, desperate men do desperate things. If he's willing to forge your signature... She didn't need to finish. If Sterling would commit mortgage fraud, what else was he capable of? My son hadn't just planned to steal my house. He'd already stolen it. And now I had 60 days to figure out how to save everything Martha and I had built, or watch it disappear, to pay for his gambling debts. I needed time to process this devastating betrayal, but time was the one thing Sterling's greed had stolen from me, too. While searching for the original mortgage papers, I found something that took my breath away. Processing Sterling's devastating betrayal had consumed my days, but I needed those original property documents to prove the mortgage fraud. Martha's antique secretary desk, the one she'd inherited from her grandmother, seemed the logical place to start. I'd avoided that desk for 8 years. Too many memories lived in those drawers. Too much of Martha's essence still lingered in the careful organization of her papers. But desperation makes you brave, and Sterling's 60-day deadline left no room for sentiment. The main drawers held what I expected: insurance policies, tax records, the mundane paperwork of a life well lived. But as I searched deeper, my fingers found something unusual, a hidden compartment I'd never known existed. Inside lay a sealed envelope, Martha's handwriting unmistakable across the cream-colored paper, to be opened only if our children prove unworthy of our love, Martha. My hands shook as I broke the seal. Martha's real will dated 1 week before her death, written in her careful script, with the precision of someone who knew time was running out. My dearest Harrison, it began, if you're reading this, then our fears about the children have proven true. I've watched them change these past few years, seen the way they look at our home at us. If they have forgotten the values we taught them, if love has been replaced by greed, then all our assets should go where they'll do the most good, to children who have nothing. The legal language was clear and binding. If Harrison determines that our children have forgotten that love without respect is not love at all, then all property, investments, and assets shall transfer immediately to children's charities in the Savannah area. Martha knew. Somehow my brilliant wife had seen this day coming and prepared for it. I found more evidence in her files: correspondence with children's hospitals, meetings with lawyers I'd never met, conversations about establishing trusts. The will my children had shown me after her funeral was a forgery. They'd hidden Martha's true wishes and created their own version, one that guaranteed their inheritance, regardless of their behavior. The next morning I drove to James Patterson's law office downtown. He was Martha's choice, not mine. A man whose reputation for integrity was legendary in Savannah's legal circles. I need to execute my late wife's true wishes, I told him, placing Martha's will on his mahogany desk. Patterson read carefully, his expression growing more serious with each paragraph. This is ironclad, Mr. Clarke. Your wife was very thorough. That afternoon I met with the Savannah Children's Hospital Foundation. The development director, a kind woman with gentle eyes, smiled sadly when I introduced myself. Mrs. Clarke spoke with us several times before she passed, she said. She hoped it would never be necessary, but she wanted everything in place just in case. She said she'd rather help children who had nothing than reward children who had forgotten everything. October flew by in a blur of legal preparations. Every document had to be perfect, every contingency planned. Martha had given me the perfect weapon against my children's greed, but I had to wield it carefully. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Sterling was forging documents to steal from me, I was preparing documents to honor my wife's deepest wishes. While he was destroying our family's foundation, I was building something that would last beyond all of us. Martha had given me the perfect way to honor her memory and teach our children the lesson they desperately needed. This Thanksgiving would be unlike any other in our family's history. Martha's final gift would either save our family or finish what Sterling's greed had started. Either way, justice would finally be served. Thanksgiving morning felt like the calm before a storm that had been 8 years in the making. The dining room had never looked more elegant. Helen had outdone herself with the table setting. Martha's finest china gleaming under the crystal chandelier, autumn centerpieces arranged with mathematical precision. Enough place settings for the family that was about to implode. Unlike any other Thanksgiving in our history, this one would end everything. They arrived in high spirits, laughing and joking as they filled the foyer with coats and conversation. Sterling seemed particularly jovial, practically bouncing on his heels as he surveyed the rooms. "Dad's finally seeing reason about downsizing," he whispered to Catherine loud enough for me to hear. "This place will bring a fortune." Garrett nodded approvingly at Amanda's latest photographs of the crown molding. "The market timing couldn't be better." Even Vivian seemed lighter, as if a great weight was about to be lifted from her shoulders. They had no idea they were walking into their own judgment day. Dinner proceeded normally. Turkey carved with precision sides, passed with practiced courtesy small talk flowing like wine. They complimented Helen's cooking, admired the autumn decorations, discussed everything except what they'd really come for. As we finished dessert, I stood slowly, my engineer's mind calculating the exact moment for maximum impact. "Before we give thanks," I said, my voice cutting through their comfortable chatter, "we need to address some truths." The room stilled. Sterling's fork froze halfway to his mouth. "I've asked my attorney to join us as a witness to what happens next." I gestured to James Patterson, who stepped forward from the hallway where he'd been waiting. Sterling's face drained of color. "Dad, what's going on?" "Sterling," I said, placing the mortgage documents on the table like evidence in a trial. "Would you like to explain the $120,000 mortgage you forged against my house?" The silence was deafening. Catherine's wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against Martha's china plate. I can explain," Sterling stammered, but his voice cracked like a teenager caught stealing. "You gambled away $120,000 of stolen money on cryptocurrency?" I continued, my voice steady as bedrock. "Money you obtained by forging my signature and fabricating power of attorney documents." Garrett shot to his feet. "I had no knowledge of this. I'm an officer of the court." "Sterling, you promised me you'd tell him." Catherine hissed, tears streaming down her face. But I wasn't finished. "There's something else you should know," I said, producing Martha's sealed envelope. "Your mother's real will." I read Martha's words aloud, her voice seeming to fill the room from beyond the grave. "Love without respect is not love at all. If our children have forgotten the values we taught them, all assets shall go to children's charities." Vivian's sob broke the silence. "We never saw this will." "Because you hid it," I replied, "and forged a fake one, just like Sterling forged the mortgage papers." The charity representative stepped forward as I'd arranged. "Following Martha's wishes and my own conscience, I'm donating this house and my entire estate to the Savannah Children's Hospital Foundation." The words hit them like a physical blow. Amanda clutched her chest. Douglas gripped the table for support. Sterling looked like he might vomit. "And Sterling," I added, meeting his terrified eyes, "the FBI will be very interested in your mortgage fraud. James has already made the call." The moment of complete silence that followed was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It was the sound of a family destroying itself of greed, finally meeting consequences of Martha's wisdom, proving itself from beyond the grave. The silence that followed was deafening. Not just quiet, but the complete absence of everything that had once made us a family. The explosion that followed wasn't just anger, it was pure desperate panic. That deafening silence shattered like glass as the full weight of their situation hit them. This wasn't a family disagreement anymore. This was financial ruin, criminal charges, and the complete destruction of everything they'd counted on. Sterling was the first to crack. "Dad, I can explain. I was going to tell you." His voice pitched higher with each word like a man drowning in his own lies. "We needed the money." Catherine screamed, her composure completely gone. Sterling's business was failing. We had creditors calling every day, but Garrett, ever the lawyer, immediately went into self-preservation mode. I knew nothing about mortgage fraud. "I'm an officer of the court. I could be disbarred." Amanda's face twisted with rage. "This is insane. You can't just give away our children's inheritance." We have rights. Daddy, please. Vivian dissolved into tears, her gentle facade crumbling. We never meant to hurt you. We were just worried about you being alone in this big house. Douglas tried to play peacemaker, his voice shaking. Maybe we should call this off talk privately, work something out. But I remained perfectly calm, Martha's strength flowing through me like steel reinforcement. In concrete, your mother predicted this exact moment, I said, pulling out more of Martha's letter. She wrote, when confronted with their greed, they will blame everyone but themselves. They will claim victimhood while victimizing others. They will demand rights they never earned and love they never gave. The accuracy of Martha's predictions was devastating. Every word she'd written was playing out exactly as she'd foreseen. Their desperation escalated like a building under too much stress. We'll contest this, Garrett shouted, his professional composure shattered. You're not mentally competent. No court will uphold this. You're destroying the family over money. Sterling accused, the irony completely lost on him. What about the grandchildren? Vivian pleaded, trying one last manipulation. They're innocent. You're punishing them for our mistakes. I stood up slowly, my engineer's mind calculating the exact moment for my final words. You wanted my house so badly? I said, my voice carrying the authority of 4 decades, building things that last. You forgot I was still living in it. The room fell silent again, but this time it was the silence of defeat, not shock. Get out, I said quietly. All of you. And don't come back until you remember what family actually means. James Patterson stepped forward, his presence a reminder that this wasn't just family drama anymore. It was a legal matter. The FBI will want to interview Sterling within the week, he said matter-of-factly. That's when the real panic set in. Sterling's face went gray. Catherine started hyperventilating. Even Garrett looked terrified, realizing his brother's crimes could splash onto his legal career. They left in stages like a building collapsing floor by floor. Sterling stumbled out first, Catherine supporting his shaking frame, both of them destroyed by the weight of criminal consequences. Garrett tried to maintain some dignity, but his parting threat fell flat. This isn't over, Dad. We'll fight this. Vivian was the last to leave, tears streaming down her face. I love you, Daddy, she whispered, but even that felt calculated now. As I watched them drive away, Sterling's car weaving slightly, Garrett's tires squealing, Vivian's brake lights disappearing into the Savannah twilight, I wondered if I'd just saved my family or destroyed it forever. Helen appeared beside me, her loyal presence steady as always. You did what Mrs. Martha would have wanted, she said softly. Only time would tell if I'd made the right choice, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally building something instead of watching it crumble. 12 months of traveling the world had given me perspective, but coming home to Savannah felt like stepping into a completely different life. The house looked exactly as I'd left it, maintained with the same care Helen had always shown, but now under the gentle stewardship of the Children's Hospital Foundation. They'd honored their promise. I could live here as caretaker for as long as I needed, tending to the place that had shaped 4 generations of Clarkes. Whether I'd made the right choice would be answered by the 3 separate phone calls I'd received during my last week in Scotland. Vivian came, first arriving on a crisp November afternoon, with none of the helpless fragility I remembered. She walked differently now, shoulders back, eyes direct, like someone who'd finally learned to carry her own weight. I divorced Douglas, she said without preamble, settling into Martha's favorite chair. I finally stood up for myself like you taught me that Thanksgiving. She told me about her new job teaching at an inner-city school, working with children who had nothing but still managed to smile. Working with kids who have nothing taught me what really matters. Mom's letter was right about all of us. Garrett arrived the next day looking older, but somehow more solid. The arrogance was gone, replaced by humility. I lost several major clients. Amanda filed for separation. I spent a year in therapy, Dad, learning that my worth isn't my wealth. His voice broke slightly. The grandchildren ask about you constantly. I want to earn back the right to be your son. Sterling came last, arriving alone in a beat-up pickup truck, his transformation the most dramatic of all. He'd lost significant weight, his face weathered by honest work and honest consequences. Dad, I served 6 months in minimum security. Federal prison. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. He sat heavily in the chair where he'd once plotted my future. The first month, I was angry at everyone but myself. Blamed you for being unreasonable. Blamed Catherine for not supporting me. Blamed the system for being unfair. Then my cellmate, an old man named Frank, who'd embezzled from his church, asked me a simple question. "What did you build, son?" I told him about my failed businesses, my schemes, my plans. He just shook his head. Sterling's voice grew quiet. Frank said, "I asked what you built, not what you took. In 63 years, I never built anything that lasted, just took from people who trusted me." That night, I couldn't sleep. I started reading in prison, not business books or get-rich schemes, but books about character, about integrity. I wrote letters to you I never sent apologizing for things I didn't even realize I'd done wrong. The work detail was kitchen duty. 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. washing dishes, mopping floors, serving food to men who'd made the same mistakes I had. My hands bled the first week. I'd never done real work before. Catherine visited once in month 3. She looked at me through that glass partition and said, "I don't know who you are anymore." I told her I'm finally becoming who I should have been all along. She never came back. Sterling showed me his hands. Calloused, scarred, honest. "I'm working construction now, Dad. 40 hours a week of real work building things instead of tearing them down. I'm paying back every penny, even if it takes 20 years. I never thanked you for not pressing additional charges. The prosecutor said you could have sent me away for 5 years, but you chose mercy over justice." His voice shook. "I forgot everything you and Mom taught me about earning things instead of taking them. Prison taught me the difference. For the first time in years, I saw my children. Not their greed, not their schemes, just the people I'd raised before wealth and expectation corrupted them. Maybe it was time to see if Martha's plan had worked, if redemption earned through suffering could rebuild what betrayal had destroyed. This Thanksgiving felt different, not because of the house or the money, but because of the people sitting around Martha's table. Martha's plan had worked in ways I was only beginning to understand. The dining room looked exactly the same. Helen had maintained every detail with loving precision, but the energy was completely transformed. Instead of 12 place settings for people who felt entitled to be there, we had 8 for people who understood the meaning of gratitude. Sterling arrived first carrying a homemade pumpkin pie that looked slightly lopsided but smelled like heaven. "I learned to cook in prison," he said with a shy smile that reminded me of the boy he'd once been. Frank taught me his grandmother's recipe. Said a man who can't feed himself can't feed his family either. Garrett came next with his children, but these weren't the spoiled, destructive kids I remembered. Tyler held the door for his sister Emma, and both of them asked permission before sitting down. "Dad says we acted spoiled before," Tyler said seriously. "We want to earn our allowance now, Grandpa." Emma nodded earnestly. "And we learned to say thank you for real, not just because grown-ups make us." Vivian was the last to arrive, but she moved through the house with purpose, immediately beginning to organize the serving dishes and coordinate with Helen. "I'm not the helpless little girl anymore," she said, tying on one of Martha's old aprons. "Prison taught Sterling to cook, divorce taught me to take care of myself." As we sat down to dinner, I noticed something remarkable. They were all helping. Sterling carved the turkey with the careful precision of someone who'd learned to value every resource. Garrett served wine but monitored his own consumption. Vivian made sure everyone had what they needed before sitting down herself. The conversation was different too. Instead of surface pleasantries, they asked real questions. About my travels, yes, but also about my health. My loneliness during the year away, my hopes for the future. "Tell us about Scotland, Dad," Garrett said. "What was your favorite part?" "The people," I answered honestly. Everywhere I went, I met families who'd been through hard times but stuck together. It made me realize something important. I stood up, feeling Martha's presence as strongly as if she were standing beside me. "The charity has agreed to let the family buy back the house," I announced, "but only if you can prove you understand its real value." Their faces showed hope, but not the desperate greed I'd seen before. "It's not about the money," I continued. "It's about the memories we make here, the values we pass down, the love we choose to give and receive." I pulled out the final page of Martha's letter, the one I'd saved for this moment. "Your mother wrote, 'True inheritance isn't money, it's character. The greatest gift parents can give is teaching children their own worth and the understanding that love must be earned and maintained.'" Sterling wiped his eyes. "We forgot that, didn't we?" For a while, I admitted. But forgetting isn't permanent if you're willing to remember. Helen appeared in the doorway, watching our family, with the satisfied expression of someone who'd witnessed a small miracle. Mrs. Martha would be proud, she said softly. As we cleaned up together, really together with everyone contributing, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. I didn't lose my family that Thanksgiving 2 years ago. I found them. Sometimes love means letting people fall so they can learn to stand. Sometimes the greatest kindness is refusing to enable weakness. The greatest inheritance I could leave them wasn't this house or any amount of money. It was the knowledge of their own worth and the understanding that love, real love, must be earned, maintained, and never taken for granted. Martha had been right about everything, even from beyond the grave, especially from beyond the grave. Looking back on this journey, I realize I made a crucial mistake that nearly cost me everything I held dear. I waited too long to set boundaries with my children. For 8 years, I confused enabling with loving, mistaking their comfort for my success as a father. Don't be like me. Don't wait until your family treats your generosity as weakness before you act. Love without respect isn't love at all. It's a transaction that will bankrupt your soul. The hardest lesson I learned is that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people face the consequences of their choices. When I discovered my children's betrayal, I felt like God was testing my faith in the very values Martha and I had tried to instill. But God has a way of working through our darkest moments. Doesn't He? Martha's hidden will wasn't just legal preparation, it was divine wisdom. She understood that true inheritance isn't money or property, but character and integrity. These grandpa stories we tell ourselves about family loyalty can become dangerous when they prevent us from demanding basic respect. This true story taught me that boundaries aren't walls. They're bridges to healthier relationships. When my children hit rock bottom, they finally looked up. Sterling's time in prison, Garrett's therapy, Vivian's newfound independence. These weren't punishments, they were God's way of redirecting their paths. The most powerful grandpa stories aren't about spoiling grandchildren or keeping peace at any cost. They're about teaching the next generation that love must be earned and maintained. Every true story of family struggle has the potential for redemption if we're brave enough to demand better. As I finish sharing these grandpa stories, I'm grateful for every painful moment. This true story of our family's breakdown and rebuilding proves that it's never too late to choose respect over comfort. Sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give your children is letting them fall so they can learn to stand. If my story resonates with your heart, please share your own experiences in the comments below. Have you ever had to choose between keeping peace and demanding respect in your family? Share this story with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that remind us what truly matters in this world.